Es que claro, se ha puesto el sol y ahora está todo. Sí, cerraron el aeropuerto. Bueno, yo tengo el pelo ahora lleno de ceniza, que vamos, así que me he estado... Ya cogí unas cuantas. Cogí unas cuantas de ceniza para repartirla ahí. Vamos mandando un saquito de arena volcánica. Pero arena. No fue grande, parece. Sí, yo traigo la ceniza, no te preocupes. Las rocas no sé, bueno, vamos a estar una semana aquí, o sea que yo supongo que tendremos tiempo, pero es que no dejan pasar. Estamos aquí en un sitio súper privilegiado, pero en cuanto coges la carretera te ves ahí a la Guardia Civil y a los... no deja pasar a nadie. Pero aquí estamos en un sitio perfecto. Claro, bueno, ya iremos a recoger las rocas, pero de momento ceniza, ahí vamos, para llenar un saco. Yo tengo ya varias bolsas ya. ¿Y por qué si la están tirando? Pero muchachos, pero si eso es... ¿qué lugar es?
Right, for anyone that's just joined, we're going to start at 8:30, so if you have any questions, get them posted on and we'll see them and then we can answer them at 5:30.
Hi everyone, I'm Ben. We're coming live from the eruption in La Palma. We're just getting set up now and we'll start about 8:30. So if you have any questions about the eruption, please pop them in the chat and we'll get them answered.
Hi everyone, my name's Rosie. We're going live in the next couple of minutes, so if you'd just like to pop your questions down the chat so that we can answer them later on in the live stream. Hi everybody, if you're just joining the live stream, welcome to La Palma. We're having some amazing images here right from about 1.5 kilometers away from the volcano. We've had quite a few things going on today, which our geo interns who are here in La Palma with us are going to be going through and discussing with you now. If you have any questions, by all means put them in the chat, and once they've gone through their introduction and through their prepared information for you to bring you bang up to date, then we'll go through the questions and you'll have a chance to be able to have your questions answered. But as you can see, we're just at sunset here. The colours are absolutely extraordinary, and the students are about to make a start in about 2 or 3 minutes time. Thanks everybody.
welcome to the Palma, where we're reporting live. My name's Rosie Rice. I'm a third year geography student at the University of Cambridge, and I'm just going to give you an overview of the latest developments today on the Palma eruption. So the biggest development today is new lava flows that were detected by drone footage. So data on these new lava flows show that they could possibly be moving faster than previous flows and might be more fluid. So these new flows are flown on top of the old flows, and we're unable to say at the moment whether these new flows will reach the sea or what direction they might travel in. Apart from that, Volcan at 12:30 in the afternoon reported a new vent that opened up. This is quite normal with this type of eruption, that new vents open up all of the time. On the social side of things, the biggest update today is that the La Palma airport has had to close because there's so much ash on the runways that they're having to clear it, and it's a huge operation at the moment so that they can get the airport operational again. As well as that, people who've been evacuated have been allowed to return to their homes for only 15 minutes to get all of their belongings, and I just couldn't imagine having such a short amount of time to grab everything that you own in a house and try and figure out what it is that's most important to you in that time. So on our live stream today, we would like to take your questions, and you can leave them below in the comments. I'm also joined by my fellow interns, Ben and Ryan, who will introduce themselves once I've left. So Ben will be given an overview of the science behind the eruption, and Ryan will be discussing whether we should be worried or concerned about anything that's been updated today. So if you're just joining us, please drop your questions in the comments. We're very happy to answer them. And I'm going to pass you over to Ben, who's going to discuss the science behind the eruption.
Hi everyone, welcome to the live stream. I hope you can hear me over the sound of the volcano. It is quite loud here and quite amazing. So I'm a fellow geo intern with Rosie and Ryan, and I've just graduated from a master's degree in volcanology from the University of Bristol. So in terms of the science behind this eruption, I'm more going to talk about the changes we've seen in the eruption over the past couple of days, and kind of the science behind those changes. So what we've seen, the big change in terms of the parameters that are monitored is the seismic tremor and the amplitude of that. So the seismic tremor sort of directly relates to the intensity of the eruption. So for the past couple of days it's been quite high, and the eruptions have been very sort of ash rich. You know, that's why we've had sort of a lot of issues with ash, particularly at the airport. And in fact, when we were here early this afternoon, it was very ash rich, you know, straight above the vent. But actually Volcan have measured a substantial decrease this afternoon into this evening of seismic tremor. And yeah, so in the evening we can see, you know, a bit more of the red, a bit more light anyway, but in the daytime, in the late afternoon when we were here, we could see that there was a lot less ash, and the fragments of lava that were being ejected from the vent were a lot larger as well. And this is because the eruption's less intense, there's less sort of fragmentation of the magma, so less of it gets fragmented into smaller ash-sized particles, and hence there's less a problem with ash. Apart from that, in the last couple of hours we've seen the development of a fracture on one of the flanks, which is just the lowest bright spot to the right you can see. So that develops when there's just like you say, a fracture in the flank, and then magma rises up through that. So that's formed a small, albeit growing, lava flow, and that feature is actually called a hornito, because it's a cone that erupts lava, but it's not, it's not directly fed by the principal feeding system that feeds sort of the main main cone. So that's the main explanations of why this eruption's changed in the past couple of days. If you have any questions more about the science, again, pop them in the chat below. And I'm now going to hand over to Ryan, who's going to answer the question: should we be worried about all this and all these changes?
Hello, I'm Ryan and I'm a Geography and Natural Hazards student at Coventry University, and everything Ben said might sound pretty scary and it sounds and looks like the end of the world, but in reality there's not too much to worry about because this volcano is well monitored by Volcan and authorities, and it's constantly being looked at and all the changes are constantly being reviewed. So some of the changes, like the ash, the authorities would look at that and advise people to wear masks and wear goggles, which could protect themselves and therefore reduce the worry that they may have. And things like the new vent that we saw opening, which we can see in the background, things like that are natural progressions of a volcano, and it's expected and is seen quite common around every part of the world. We've got volcanic eruptions. So people know what to do, and the authorities know what to do, and things like this happen, so it's likely that this new lava flow will go over the old one, and it's not anything to be worried about. Areas close by are evacuated, and this volcano will continue to develop and will change constantly, but the level of monitoring that's going on by Volcan and the control that the authorities have over the situation means that in reality, no, you shouldn't be too worried, because everything is looking pretty good from that perspective.
Thank you very much for all the questions that are coming in. We're going to go through them in just a second. Guys, you've done a really good job for your first live stream. That was a really interesting roundup. I would, of course, just caution that although we're hoping that in terms of keeping people and animals safe, of course there is a developing story here in La Palma regarding people's property. So we've already, of course, people have lost livelihoods, they've lost homes, and in terms of the local people here, obviously that causes great distress. There's a shortage of housing here in La Palma. Ironically, there's only a small population here of about 48,000 people, I think, and the housing stock isn't that large, and a lot of it is actually dedicated to tourists. So the local government here, I believe, have bought up 2 housing developments to try and rehouse some of the 6,000 people who have currently, or the 6,000 homes that have currently been lost. So again, thanks to the guys for the update, and as I say, in terms of an experience for them, it's extraordinary, but we must always, of course, bear in mind what's happening here at a local level and the people here. I think we're going to go through the questions now, guys, so I'm just going to reset the tripod, so give us a second, keep putting your questions in the chat, and we'll go through the questions one at a time. So, Rosie, I think you wanted to add something about the social side of the eruption. If you'd like to just come into shot for us, that would be great.
Yeah, so as Sharon said, when you arrive at this type of eruption, or when you're reading about this type of eruption on the news, it's quite easy to kind of get caught up as everything unfolds, and kind of, I guess when you're on the outside looking in, it's very easy to almost feel excited about everything that's unfolding. But what's so important to remember is that this eruption right behind me right now is changing people's lives right here on the island of La Palma. And just today I've been conducting interviews with local people heading to La Palma on the ferry, local scientists, about the last eruption that was in 1971 and how their memories of that eruption have influenced the way they've responded to this eruption. And what was really interesting to hear is that because the eruption in 1971 was much smaller and the impacts were just not as destructive compared to this eruption, is that, you know, that eruption has almost been forgotten because it didn't really impact people's livelihoods as much, whereas this eruption right behind me has already destroyed, I think, over 450 houses so far. It's covered 190 hectares with lava flows, and on a small island 190 hectares is a lot of land. You know, that's people's farmland, that's people's livelihoods, that's the way that they give their children a future. So it's so important to, you know, whilst yes, this behind me looks incredible and, you know, it's such a spectacle to see, it's so important to remember that there's people being affected by this eruption. There's stories, every single person affected has their own narrative, and it's up to us and other reporters and other scientists to make sure that we report on those narratives and tell the world that yes, there's an exciting eruption going on behind me, but there's people on the ground here whose lives are now changed forever. And it's so important to remember that. So if you have any questions on the social side of the eruption, about the memories of the 1971 eruption, please just pop them in the comments and I'm more than happy to do my best to answer them. But obviously, what I think is also really important to remember is that me, Ben and Ryan are all from the UK. We're all outsiders here looking in. You know, we don't know what it's like to be from the Palma, and so please just take our opinions, our answers to the questions on the social side of things, and remember that we are outsiders. This isn't our country, this isn't our land, so we can only describe the atmosphere, the emotion that we've seen whilst being here. And that's also so important to remember when you're discussing any social impacts, is how your own positionality affects how you see what's going on around you and how you experience it yourself.
Okay, if you just give us a second here, we're going to start scrolling through the questions. So, I guess this is one for you, Ben. Is this a new development that was perhaps before you started talking? But this is the new Ornito to the right, I guess, they're asking about. And in fact, it's interesting because Ben posted an update not long after we got to this site when we saw this opening up. And ever since we've been here for the last, would you say 2 or 3 hours, Ben, it's certainly increased in intensity. So that's something that he identified, and now we can really see it picking up steam to the right there. So this is a new development, isn't it, Ben?
Yeah. So it's just, so it's just as Sharon says, come in the last. I'll come in here. Has just come in the last sort of 2 or 3 hours. And again, as Ryan said, it's quite normal. You know, we've got sort of the main cone there with the main vent in the middle. But these structures are very unstable, especially when you've got, you know, more explosive strombolian activity like we do at the minute. So it's natural over time that the flanks of these cones will degrade, and new sort of easier pathways for magma will develop, which is why you get sort of these more effusive vents opening up lower down the flanks of these cones.
Thank you, Ben. So there's a question on the chat asking us how far we are from the volcano. We're actually only about 1.5 kilometers away from the volcano here. So we are basically on a site that is used by Spanish television, and they've very kindly allowed us access to the site because our expert Alexis Schwartz is collaborating with them, and in fact he will be on one of their programs tomorrow at about 1 o'clock. So we're very lucky to have this really privileged view to discuss and consider the ongoing eruption of La Palma. We have Mr. Shaliwal, one of our previous geo interns. Hi to you. Asking, do Involcan know how the eruption will develop or how long it will last? Ben, again, perhaps you might give us a little rundown on that.
Yeah, so how long will the eruption last? Well, this is the question that everyone wants to know, and the question that is unfortunately very difficult, if not impossible, to answer. I mean, there's many ways you could look at this. I mean, you could look to sort of the previous eruptions on La Palma. So the previous eruption here in 1971 lasted 20 days. But however, this eruption already looks a lot more significant, a lot bigger than that eruption, so you know that's not really a reliable estimate. But if we're going sort of on these type of fissure eruptions sort of globally, we're probably talking anywhere between weeks to months on that time scale. But yeah, we really don't know, so we just have to sort of wait and see.
Actually, Ben, what's really interesting is that just before coming here, at the end of your internship with us in Tenerife, your week 4 in fact, you were up in Deidre National Park studying the dike, the plumbing system of a previous fissure eruption like this one, which took place in 1704 to 1705. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I seem to remember that lasted about 3 months as well, didn't it?
Yeah,
it seemed to have a similar sort of profile to this, did it?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. Bear with me while I scroll through the questions. This is not a very comfortable way of doing things. If anybody has suggestions of a better way to read the questions, let me know. Somebody's saying things could change. Of course, this is an evolving situation, but according to our expert opinion here, Alexis, I think you would say that for now, even though things are evolving and changing, it's still within the parameters of what we would expect, yes?
Yeah, that's correct. This is a typical Strombolian behavior. Sorry.
Just bear with us a sec, guys.
Yeah. Yes, what we have here is typical Strombolian eruption. Strombolian eruptions have this character, they change, they evolve, but always between certain limits. So the question about this, the evolution of this eruption is unknown. Nobody can really know how this eruption will evolve or how long it will last. But certainly what we see and what we've seen in the last week is a typical Strombolian behavior. Emission of lavas, low explosivity, lot of pyroclastic material, and clouds of ash that are transported by the wind. Both lavas and ash are causing at the moment the main problems. But again, this what can be predicted of these eruptions is that they have this type of behavior all throughout. Sometimes the intensity will increase, sometimes it will decrease. New vents may open and then will close again, and so on. So this is what we've seen so far, and this is what we expect. Again, we don't know how long it's going to last, but probably weeks, maybe months. We will see.
Thank you very much, Alexis.
Yeah.
I'm delighted to see on the chat here that one of our previous Geo interns, Sailor, hello to you. You're joining us here, which is lovely to see you back here again. In fact, you spent your time here on La Palma. Sailor was one of our scholars. Actually, she did tremendous work here in La Palma. And she's asking, is that noise that we hear in the background coming from the volcano? Absolutely it is. So actually, I'm going to just keep quiet just for a second so that you can just hear the sound it's making. Okay, Ryan's going to take over on reading the questions. Perhaps you might just stay there, Alexis and Ben and Rosie. What's the question? Alexis, I think we've got another question coming in here. This is an excellent question. Divas, our scholar, our virtual scholar from India, hello to you. Really nice to see you on our live stream here. You've asked actually a hugely pertinent question, which Alexis, I'm sure, will be very pleased to answer. Alexis, does the viscosity of lava remain constant during the entire duration, or does it change in an unpredictable manner? That's a great question, Divas. Thank you.
Yeah. Look, the viscosity of the magma depends mainly on temperature and chemical composition. If we assume that the magma that is being erupted comes from the same part of the this is coming from the mantle. So therefore, we expect the viscosity of the magma to be the same. But the second factor is temperature. So therefore, when you have a lava flow being emitted as the one that is at the moment being erupted by this flank eruption, these lavas have low viscosity because of the high temperature. So they will run pretty fast. As the lava is traveling, obviously it will be losing heat and the temperature will decrease. When the temperature of the lava decreases, the viscosity will increase. So this is what we are this is what we are observing at the moment. So yes, the viscosity of the lava is going to change. It will increase gradually because of the lower temperature. There are certain eruptions that may be fed by different magmas, and that is another matter. Then we will have changes in viscosity due to changes in chemical composition. But at the moment, what I think we see here is just the same type of magma being erupted. So in principle the viscosity of the initial viscosity is the same, but it will increase gradually, and this is what we see in this eruption.
That's really interesting. Thank you, Alexis. Now we have a question come in from a non-scientist, so somebody after my own heart, which is great. We always say in this business there are no silly questions, and if there's something you're interested in knowing, just ask us a question, and if we can help and if we can answer, we certainly will. So don't feel put off if you suddenly feel the science content is going up. We're here to answer anybody's questions who's interested. So we have a question here, Alexis. Why does a cone form with the intensity of the heat, the lava doesn't remain as liquid as more is spewed onto it, and the volcano
wait a
knows.
minute, because these are like 2 or 3 questions
Yeah,
in one.
exactly.
Okay.
So why does the cone form? So there's
The cone forms
there's
because
hot lava being spewed out.
look, what you have there, what you see there, these jets of magma. At the same time, the explosions you hear are because the gas that was dissolved in the magma is being exhaled. This obviously, when the gas comes out of the magma, it will expand because of the low pressure. You have to consider this magma is a very high pressure. When it reaches the surface, suddenly that pressure drops, and then the magma will expand and will fragment the rock into tiny particles, which are bombs, lapilli, or ash particles, depending on the diameter. So basically then, what you have is a continuous rain of this pyroclastic material, ash, lapilli, and bombs, following a ballistic trajectory, a parabolic trajectory, and falling quite close, especially those heavier, like bombs and lapilli, will fall around the vent, the eruption vent. And the accumulation of this material around the volcanic vent will form the volcanic cone that we see at present. The shape of this cone changes as the eruption progresses. Sometimes it may collapse or part of it, and then it will be rebuilt and so on. So eventually, but at the end of the process, we usually have this cone formed by accumulation of eruptive material around the vent.
Thank you, Alexis.
That's one part of the question.
Yes.
What was the other?
Well, I think we'll move on to the next question, because actually that was a very full answer, and I think might well have covered everything that was in the question.
Okay.
But we have another question here. Is La Palma, is it on the fault line, and is there a danger of an eruption? This is one of our key questions we get about La Palma.
Line.
So there
what
is.
fault line are we talking about?
I think what they're referring to is there this science about supposedly that we're going to have a flank collapse and a tsunami.
Look,
and
that is not a fault. That is a fracture. But it's not deep enough to be worried about. Listen, the sector collapse, these landslides that happen are a common phenomenon in the growth of ocean islands. Ocean islands grow very rapidly, and from time to time some part of the island will collapse and go into the sea. So there is this story that are saying that because of this eruption, a sector collapse on La Palma may be triggered and may take place. We don't have any evidence of any major fracture that could make us think that a collapse of this nature is going to happen. I think this is a very, very sensationalist issue. These are normal eruptions. Although they look very, very impressive, they are very low magnitude and low intensity eruptions if you compare to other types of eruptions that we have had in the Canary Islands, like in Tenerife or Gran Canaria, for example. I'm talking about very explosive Plinian eruptions. This is just an effusive eruption. So it doesn't matter the amount of energy you see released in this event, it's not going to be enough to cause any major sector collapse in La Palma. We need a very strong earthquake. Remember, the earthquake we are suffering here are never stronger than magnitude 4, which is barely felt by the population. You would need a magnitude 8 or 9 earthquake to trigger a landslide like that. So I think we have to start disconnecting this eruption from these catastrophic events that have happened in the past, but there's no any evidence that it's going to happen at present. Maybe in the far future, but not at present.
Excellent, thank you, Alexis. I think that's a story we're very happy to address, because we are actually Just very disappointed to see it resurface time and time again, and all the interns are nodding their heads around me. It is a theory that came up and which has been sort of refuted time and again by so many different scientists, and it's just a sensationalist story which actually spreads fear and panic, which is absolutely not the right case. So again, we would say this is, as Alexis was saying, there's energy in this eruption, and the destruction that's been caused for now, thankfully, is to property and not to people, and that is very much the case in the historic eruptions that we have in the Canary Islands. In fact, the previous eruption here was in 1971, and I think I'm right in saying there was only one person who died, and that's somebody who got a little bit too close to the eruption and was overcome by fumes rather than having any problems with the lava or anything like that. Although the lava does advance, normally it gives the authorities plenty of time to evacuate and to stay ahead of it, but of course we are seeing very sad scenes of people losing their homes. La Palma is very different to Tenerife. It is a smaller island. It has a lot less tourism, classical tourism, than Tenerife, and people here do live from the land, from their banana plantations, in a more traditional way, on the whole, much more than in Tenerife. And it does mean that people who perhaps went across to Cuba and Venezuela 50 years ago to try and make their fortune, to earn some money, came back, bought a bit of land, lived from it, and are seeing their sort of life savings and their hard toil being swallowed up by the lava. So those are the sad, tragic stories that we're seeing at the moment, but thankfully they remain with the property and the infrastructure. Yes. Rosie, could you jump in? It would be great if you could just talk us through the social side of that tsunami story, because it would be, it's a good opportunity just to put that to rest once and for all, please.
Yeah. So I think it's really important to kind of highlight that these stories that kind of get regurgitated by the media just so they can get a headline can cause a lot of anxiety to those who are reading it, especially, not everyone has access to these journal articles that disprove these theories. Not everyone, academic language is very difficult to understand, even for us that study it and are familiar with it. So the general public, it's very difficult to find those sources, those accurate sources, and that's why it's up to kind of scientists on the ground or those reporting on it to send out accurate information. And I think it's really important to highlight that these stories that go out there cause so much anxiety for the people of La Palma, who are already going through incredibly distressing time. They also cause a lot of anxiety for those who are on the east coast of America that this article says will be affected. And if you are watching this and you're feeling anxious about any of that, then I think it's really important to try and find those accurate news sources to put your mind at rest. And if you're on Twitter, there's a great thread by Dr. Janine Krippner, kind of debunking this myth and kind of pointing you towards those resources if you are feeling anxious about it. So yeah, just I guess if you see any of this on social media, please do not retweet or kind of regurgitate this information, because it has been proven inaccurate, that original paper that came out. And if you are feeling anxious about it at this time, then my heart goes out to you. And I really hope by watching this you can kind of feel a little less anxious about the entire theory. And yeah, if you have any questions about it, then please just drop them in the comments. But we would like to kind of put it to rest and encourage you to think about the sources that you're retweeting, think about where they came from and who sent them. So yeah.
Thank you, Rosie. That's a really important thing that you've just said there, and for us all to bear in mind. Now I can see a lovely willow pattern there, and I'm hoping in front of that lovely willow pattern will appear a very good friend of GeoTenerife who's been with us in Tenerife quite recently. Aha! There we are, Professor Rich Brown. Thank you for joining us.
Hello guys, how are you?
You left a bit too soon, Rich.
I did, yeah. I'm very disappointed. Yeah. Wow, I'm so excited for you. You're out. You're in front of a live volcano. It's amazing.
Yes, I know. All this sort of 2 weeks of science communication training, and then we had a live eruption exercise using all the information from the El Hierro eruption, and a week later here we are. So yes, indeed, extraordinary times.
Yeah, brilliant. So how's it looking out there? I'm sorry, I've just joined your live.
Don't worry at all. I'm gonna. Oh, can you hear that sound?
I can. Sounds very scary.
It's extraordinary.
Yeah.
I'll just put Alexis in front of you. Perhaps you could have a quick chat with Alexis. Bear with me with a sec while I readjust my feet because I'm in a very odd position here, and we'll just get the angle right. Thank you. Right, there we are.
Hi, Rich. How are you?
Ah, you're the right way around now. Hi, Rich.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I really struggle to listen to you properly. You can't imagine the noise here. It's amazing, the amount of noise. We are having quite a high intensity Strombolian eruption here, and well, it has caused quite a lot of destruction because you have to remember the eruption vent is quite high, so therefore the lavas traveling towards the sea have had a lot of a lot of space to destroy everything on its way. So unfortunately, this eruption is completely different to the last 1971 Tenerife eruption, in which no loss of property took place and the people just looked at it like a big spectacle. Unfortunately, here we have, I don't know whether it's 300 or 400 houses already destroyed.
I think it's 450 now.
Roads and everything. So, and it's ongoing. I mean, it looks like it's going to last because although the intensity varies, but there are some phases like now, for example, it's really going very, very strongly. So we are pretty pleased from the scientific point of view, you can imagine. But of course, feeling sorry for all the damage.
Yeah. And so is it into a more explosive phase at the moment, Alexis?
Is it a more explosive phase?
Yeah. Rich, this is in fact the truth. I mean, to be honest, in the last week of eruption, we've seen between certain limits, but there have been phases much more explosive, and then other phases that are less explosive. But at present, I mean, the last 2 days, the explosivity of the eruption has increased, but always within the Strombolian type of eruption. So we have had a lot of ash falling all over the place, and now the airport is closed because of the ash fall. So it's been raining ash all the time on top of us. But yes, certainly it's very explosive, but and very noisy. But well, it's a huge spectacle. But in fact, I mean, we were thinking that the type of eruption we were going to expect would be something like Tenerife, but that's not the case. It seems to be more intense, and probably we don't know about the magnitude yet, but certainly this lava flow has destroyed a lot of property. I suppose it's to do with the location of the eruptive vent. So, but yes, it's ongoing, and it seems to be, it's changing in character, more explosive, less explosive. Seems to be during the evening, it's kind of the explosivity is increasing. The same happened yesterday.
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
Well,
so you still have time to come. I think this is going to last.
Excellent. Well, you guys stay safe, and
Yes. Thanks, Rich. Yes,
Yeah.
we're all goggled up and masked up. We just take the masks off just for the transmission. But really good to see you. Thank you for joining us today.
Great to talk to you, Rich.
I look forward to seeing what you guys find and see. Take care.
Take care, you too.
Bye.
Take care.
The jets are getting taller. and it's travelling further down towards the sea. Yeah, the jet's
Guys, do you
getting higher.
want to give us a bit of an update on what's going on here? Guys, I'm sorry if we've missed some of your questions. There's been quite a bit of scrolling going on. I think the guys are just going to give us a quick update on what's going on here, and then we'll go for some more questions. So,
Yeah.
Ryan, what have you been seeing?
Well, as Alexis was talking, it has noticeably got very much louder, and the live jets coming out of the cone have also got a lot taller, which means a lot of the material...
Ryan, sorry, you have to look at us because we can't hear you. Sorry. Don't follow us.
The material is travelling a lot further down the side of the flanks. We can see as the jets are getting extremely high, a lot higher than we've seen all day, and it's a lot easier to see at night as well, with the material glowing red on the side, down the sides of the volcano. But it's definitely gotten more intense. It's got louder, the jets got higher, and the material is travelling further down on the right hand side down the flanks of the volcano. So that's the update that we've noticed.
Thank you.
May
Thank
I say
you.
something? Because
Please.
I was talking to Ben now.
Hang on, can you just stand in front?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
We'll get you lined up.
You see there was a flank eruption, so there was an eruption vent lower in the
When we
volcano
started,
edge,
yes.
but suddenly a huge jet of magma has covered that volcanic vent, and seems to be, I mean, it was really, really active and emitting a lot of lava flow, but at the moment, at least temporarily, this volcanic vent has been covered by a lot of pyroclastic material, and the fusion of lava has decreased quite a lot. So this is a very ongoing and changing situation. We see how the eruption is changing in front of our eyes. Yeah, the explosivity, I mean, it's becoming noisier, that's for sure.
Definitely. Guys, I'm sorry if you've asked a question and we haven't answered it yet. If you'd like a question answered, can you please just pop it in the chat again? Sorry, it's quite difficult to film and to scroll at the same time. For some reason, the questions seem to scroll up sideways. So if you want a question answered that we haven't answered yet, please put it in the chat. Oh, here's a very good question, Alexis.
Yes.
A question here. How long do you think? Sorry.
Yeah.
That is loud.
Really loud now.
How long before the eruption reaches the sea, do you think?
Wow, look, we really don't know. If the eruption continues at this rate and continues long enough, which we don't know either of those two factors, then the lava tends to reach the sea naturally. This has happened many times in the past. There is not a big problem with the lava reaching the sea at all. I mean, I've heard about people worry about big explosions or toxic gas emissions and so on. Again, these are exaggerations. There may be some explosion, obviously, because of the contact of the magma with the seawater that will vaporize in a very explosive manner. These explosions are going to be localized and will only affect very local areas. The other thing is how long? We don't know. We don't know whether it's going to reach the sea or not. And if it reaches the sea, we don't know when this is going to happen. So I'm afraid these eruptions pose many questions, but unfortunately, most of them cannot be answered at the present stage of the volcanological knowledge.
In fact, that's a really interesting point that Alexis makes, and one of the very key reasons why we run the summer training programs that we do, because we actually need young people. We do need young people to be going into volcanology, getting involved. It's actually becoming a far more multidisciplinary science, And I think we need to draw in young people from lots of different sectors with an interest in volcanology, because actually what we don't understand about volcanoes, I think it's right to say, is probably a lot more than what we do. And there's still so much we need to learn. So we do need young people to come into this field with new ideas, new ways of thinking, new technology, new ways of seeing things, and drawing all the threads together, because I think just a classic way of looking at volcanoes isn't enough anymore. I have to say what was really interesting here, and correct me if I'm wrong, Alexis, but although this volcano was monitored for a long time, and we had, I think, 10 different cycles, this being the last one, of seismic swarms in recent years, the key factors that told us we're definitely going for an eruption this time were the deformation of the terrain, which we saw in the last 24 hours prior to the eruption. Is that right?
And the seismic activity.
And the seismic activity.
Yeah. These two precursors have been, well, very, very important. Something we have, we shouldn't be pessimistic, thinking, well, we don't know anything, we don't know how long it's going to last, we don't know the type of eruption. Yes, we know the type of eruption. It's a Strombolian eruption. This is something we expected, and it is taking place. So in that sense, we were right. Another thing is, we knew this eruption was going to happen, or at least that it was probable, because the seismic activity indicated that there was a movement of magma and it was ascending. And we've seen that very clearly. And we also have seen a lot of ground deformation. At present time is up to 30 centimeters. So the island of La Palma has been uplifted 30 centimeters, and believe me, that is a very huge amount. So combining the two measurements, we knew that the eruption was going to happen, or at least it was very likely, and we were right in that sense. Now, once the eruption starts, there's no way to know how long it's going to last, with no way to know how much magma is going to be erupted, and therefore, these are all things that at present we cannot know. But as Sharon told you, that is true. Basically, we have these two very powerful techniques, seismology and geodesy, which is the study of land deformation, which have proved to be very, very valuable in predicting this huge event that we are witnessing nowadays.
Thank you, Alexis. That's super helpful. In fact, we're joined now by this year's scholar. Hello, Carolina. I can see you there. Very nice to see you. And you're asking a question. Let me scroll back. How far are we right now from the eruption, Carolina? We're about a kilometer and a half from the eruption, something like that. We've been incredibly lucky, thanks to all the media work that we've been doing. Spanish television have allowed us access to the site where we're at the moment. But we are a safe distance away. Don't worry, we're not running any dangers, any risk. We've got the Zoom on, so that's the main thing there. Divas from India is asking if one of you guys would like to tackle this question. Can a Strombolian eruption change to a Plinian eruption?
No.
It's a good question, a good one to clarify. Thank you.
No, there's no way that can happen. I'm going to tell you why. Plinian eruptions are always associated to more evolved magmas. We are talking about andesitic, dacitic, phonolithic magmas. This is purely basaltic. So the composition of the magma will determine the type of eruption we have. To have a Plinian eruption, we need magmas that are more evolved than these basaltic magmas we have. So a basaltic magma will only cause mainly Hawaiian or Strombolian activity. Maybe some Vulcanian phases, but mostly Strombolian or Hawaiian. This is a typical Strombolian eruption. It is a mildly explosive eruption, but we cannot compare the amount of energy released in a Plinian eruption. So there's no way you can change a Strombolian eruption to a Plinian one, because what you would need is a complete change in the magma type, and this has never been seen. and theoretically it's pretty difficult. So I would say no.
Thank you, Alexis. There's a question here for Rich, and Rich, thank you for answering Divas's question in the chat. It's quite difficult to see all the questions here where we are, but Rich is asking, how big do you think the ballistic clasts are that we can see falling, Alexis? We can see some ballistic clasts. How big do you think they are? I mean, it's quite difficult to estimate from here.
All different sizes. Remember, we have pyroclastic material from ash size, which is less than 2 millimeters. We have lapilli between 2 and 64 millimeters, and everything above 64 millimeters are going to be bombs. We don't know. I mean, they are usually, they could be centimeter or meters in size, depending on the explosivity. We see a constant rain of pyroclastic material, and from time to time, we see a major block that's being ejected. It's very difficult to see because we cannot approach the volcano at present to measure the size of this material. But if you consider the previous eruptions of the same type, then these are the typical sizes I'm talking about. So you may find mostly, a few blocks, maybe 40, 50 centimeters, or even blocks that are a couple of meters big, okay?
Thank you for that, Alexis. We have Victoria asking, what are we working on while we're here? Victoria, we've literally just finished our summer training program, GeoIntern, when this eruption took place. And we've been receiving so many requests for media representation that we've come across to La Palma, because our main aim here is to make sure that sensible information makes it into the international media. I have to say, over the years, we've seen many sensationalist stories going into the press, and sometimes from far away it's very difficult to get a real handle on what's happening locally, and the wrong language can be used, and we can forget the effect that these events have on the local population, for example. So our aim here is we're actually filming a documentary. We've been tasked to film a documentary. We will be following a number of scientists, people from the emergency services, and basically documenting all the work that's going on here, because I think a lot of people who might hear 2 or 3 headlines a day about La Palma don't realize how many people are being affected on the one hand, but on the other hand, how many people are actually working incredibly hard to keep people safe. I was speaking only this afternoon to somebody whose road sweeping machine has now become, his name is Oscar, hola Oscar. His road sweeping machine has become now an ash sweeper, and he's been working night and day, literally until 4 o'clock in the morning every single day to keep the roads clear and safe. And this is one of the things we would like to underscore. If anybody's thinking of coming to La Palma, if any of you are in La Palma, please keep access roads clear. This is absolutely paramount. We have to make sure that as this situation develops, the emergency services can still have access cleanly, clear. When people have to evacuate, if there have to be any more evacuations, we absolutely want to make sure that they can have maximum time available to be able to do that. At the moment, people are being given just 15 minutes to take stuff out of their homes, which must be incredibly difficult. I mean, if you were told you only had 15 minutes to take stuff from your house and then move away, you can imagine how dramatic that has been. So if you're here, please, be sensible, keep safe, keep to the restricted areas. You can get a view from places, but don't interfere with the very hard work people are doing here to keep people safe. And all of us here want to pay enormous tribute to the very hard work people are doing in making sure that things keep running, people are safe, and we just sit this eruption out and just try to make sure the damage is as limited as possible. We were on the boat today with a fire brigade coming across from the neighbouring island of La Gomera, and it was really interesting because I asked them whether forest fires were something that they were concerned about, and they said actually the lava is so hot it sucks up all the oxygen towards it, and the fire doesn't prosper. So actually they end up doing lots of different tasks. On the one hand, and Alexis, you can correct me on this, in fact Ben, you were telling me about this earlier, you were talking about ashfall on flat roofs here. you don't actually need a very thick layer of ash on these houses for them to collapse, do you? It's incredibly heavy, and it's something I hadn't realised. So maybe you might tell us a little bit about that. Maybe just from where you are.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
footing is a bit difficult here.
Yeah, no, so ash is incredibly dense because it comes from, you know, the basaltic magma, which is very sort of dense in metals such as iron and magnesium. So yeah, it's really very dense. So, you know, in some places you may only need, you know, 10 centimetre thickness of ash, which, you know, is not sort of unthinkable for, you know, a lot of the areas in the vicinity of the eruption, especially on flat roofs. You only need sort of that sort of thickness to, you know, start to put real strain on these roofs. And, you know, especially when there's eruptions in, say, countries with less, you know, robust housing infrastructure, say corrugated iron roofs, just there's so much damage from collapsing roofs of ash, and if there's any rain during the eruption which mixes and coagulates with the ash just gets even more dense, and then the problem's even worse. So, you know, a very critical job is for people to go around scrubbing significant thicknesses of ash off people's rooftops to stop that happening. And I mean, that extends you know, to vegetation as well. You know, you can see, you know, sometimes vegetation collapsing, and there was, you know, videos going around over the last few days of people frantically scrubbing ash from their banana plantations in an attempt to save the plants. So it's a really critical issue, and there's a lot of ongoing research at the minute into, you know, how we can design roofs to be affordable, to drain well, and also in volcanic areas to avoid the build-up of ash.
Ben, that's very helpful, thank you. I was going to ask Rosie, I think we have one or two questions on social media, if you'd like to check those out for us. Which social media?
I've got a question.
Just bear with us. Actually, somebody asked earlier whether we could feel the heat, but not from this distance. Okay. I have to say I feel hot, but it's probably just holding the camera.
If we could feel the heat, we would probably be a bit too
A bit
close.
too close. Quite right. Quite right. Please watch your footing there. Oh no, Rosie, please watch your footing. Thank you. Yeah, there we are. So Rosie, yes, I think there was a question.
Yeah, so it's a question not actually on social impacts, but I'm still happy to read it out. And if anyone else wants to jump in what I'm going to say, feel free to. So I was asked, were there any warning signs before the eruption, like earthquakes or anything? So actually, funny enough, I remember, like, I think it was a Tuesday before the eruption started, Sharon pointed out to us that there'd been an increase in seismic activity recorded on La Palma whilst we were out in the field doing field work. So kind of, there's been, like, in Volcan, have monitored this volcano year round, and there's so there was an increase in seismic activity yes before the eruption, and seismic activity is one of what we call a precursor, so kind of signs that a volcano might erupt. There are other precursors such as gas emissions that can tell us kind of what's going on inside or underneath the volcano. So yes, there was an increase in seismic activity. I don't know if anyone else wants to
Yes,
jump in
in
on
fact, yeah, no, it's a really interesting question. Ryan, you wanted to jump in there? Yeah. Just bear with us, guys. Just mind your footing. Just bear with us.
So yeah, to the earthquake precursors, they've come in sort of clusters throughout the first one that I remember reading about, there may have been some before, was in December of 2020, that there was a cluster of earthquakes that happened at a deeper level of about 30 kilometres. And that was kind of a sort of quite an early indicator there was some sort of movement going on. And then what we saw was that another cluster of seismic activity happened at a higher elevation, so it was around 12 kilometres, maybe even 10. And this was an indicator that the magma was moving throughout the system and potentially rising. So it's a better indication that something was going on. And then just, well, a day or 2 days prior to the eruption happening, again, the earthquakes were shallower and stronger. There was some reaching sort of around 3, and there was one 3.8 as the eruption started. So these, like seismic clusters and seismic events, are what we call volcanic earthquakes, and they are good indicators that there is some sort of movement going on with the magma beneath the surface, and can give people monitoring the volcano an idea of what's going on beneath the surface and have some sort of preparation. Not necessarily panic stations and telling everyone that it's going to happen, because that's not always the case, but they can give them a good idea of something's going on, and they can prepare, and just in case it does, and in this case it did.
Yeah, so in fact that's a really good point, Ryan. I think something we were discussing over lunch, Alexis, you know, this is the 10th, I think I'm correct in saying, correct me if I'm wrong, in the last couple of years, the 10th seismic swarm that we had that as it built up. And of course, none of those had actually led to an eruption previously, and maybe that just built up the energy in the system.
Yeah.
I mean, you can tell I'm not a scientist, but I like to get the scientific answers.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why we're having so much energy in this eruption now, because of
it's
the
probable,
amount of activity.
Yeah, as you know, we've been we have had several volcanic crises, or this type of periods of time where we have a lot of seismic activity, and probably, well, you are right. I mean, probably in each one of those events that didn't end with an eruption, what we have is magma was accumulating at the base of the lithospheric plate below La Palma, and eventually probably the amount of magma accumulated, we're talking about 10 kilometers, was big enough to be able to rise until reaching the surface. We never knew until the eruption took place, because mostly, I mean, 80% of these crises never end in an eruption, because you have injections of magma, we call them magma intrusions, but very rarely they reach the surface. But in this case, and probably because of the amount of magma accumulated, probably then we have enough magma to be able to reach the surface and erupt, as has happened in this occasion.
Alexis, that's very helpful. Thank you very much, guys. If you don't mind, I think we'll leave it there. We have to change our location, and I think Alexis has a connection with Al Jazeera in the not too distant future, and he's been on various channels with the BBC throughout the day, and he's on local television tomorrow. So thank you very much indeed for joining us, and we will hopefully join up tomorrow. So keep an eye on our social media, and depending on what other international or local media commitments we have, we'll try and set a time, and perhaps at a different location to link up today. So to Ben, to Rosie, to Ryan, Alexis, and from me, Sharon, thank you all very much for joining us. Thanks. Good night, everybody. Good night.